August 19, 1793, Water Street, Philadelphia. The air between Race and Arch doesn't move, it sits heavy, thick with the smell of damaged coffee rotting on the docks, and fish left too long in the August heat. The sky is white with drought, and no rain has fallen in weeks. In the open barrels lining the alleys, the water sits still, breeding something no one can see. Dr. Benjamin Rush steps out of a house near the wharf, his hands are shaking. He's just examined a patient with symptoms unlike anything he's read in his medical texts: high fever, violent headache, eyes inflamed and wet with pain. The man's skin is flushed, but beneath it, something wrong is happening, something Rush can't name. This is the capital of the United States, where 50,000 people live. President Washington governs from a mansion on Market Street, and Thomas Jefferson walks these same blocks. The treasury of the new nation sits in buildings within sight of the Delaware River. This is the most important city in America, and it's parched, crowded, and about to become a graveyard. By nightfall, 3 more cases appear in the same neighborhood. By the end of the week, the number climbs to dozens. The disease moves faster than rumor, and families go to bed healthy, and wake to find their children burning with fever. Within days, the skin turns yellow, the vomit turns black, and then, almost always, death arrives. The people of Philadelphia don't know it yet, but their city is about to empty, the government will flee, the wealthy will abandon their homes, and the dead will pile up faster than they can be buried. And the bonds that hold a society together, the handshake, the visit, the care of family, will be severed by a terror so complete that parents will throw their children into the street at the first sign of a headache. This isn't ancient history, it's 1793, and the nation is, by all accounts, 10 years old, and its capital is about to face a test it cannot pass. Philadelphia, in the summer of 1793, was not a city in decline. It was the apex of the young republic, a thriving, crowded metropolis that had doubled in size since the Revolution. 50,000 people lived inside its compact grid, making it the largest city in North America. It was the temporary capital of the United States, the seat of federal power, and, as such, a hub of activity. While Washington, D.C. was still being carved out of Maryland swampland, the city was defined by its rivers, the Delaware to the east, and the Schuylkill to the west, making Philadelphia a hub of international trade. Ships arrived daily from the Caribbean, Europe, and the far Atlantic, their holds packed with sugar, rum, spices, and slaves. The wharves were forests of masts, and the streets near the docks were loud with merchants shouting prices in half a dozen languages. Architecturally, the city was transforming: new brick houses, in the federal style, lined Market and Chestnut streets, replacing the older timber structures. The State House, later called Independence Hall, still dominated the skyline, a symbol of the fragile democracy being built inside its walls. The population density was, truly, extreme, with households averaging 6 people. Families lived on top of one another in multi-story buildings, sharing walls, air, and disease. But Philadelphia wasn't just a commercial engine, it was a center of Enlightenment thought. The American Philosophical Society met regularly, and Benjamin Franklin's legacy still permeated the city's intellectual life. Dr. Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and the most prominent physician in America, practiced here, and the College of Physicians of Philadelphia had been founded just 8 years earlier. This was a city that believed in reason, science, and progress, and, as such, it was a place of great optimism. Yet, beneath the prosperity, vulnerabilities festered. The city had no municipal water system, and residents collected rain water in open barrels, or bought it from water carters who hauled it up from the rivers. Wooden buckets, reminders of a simpler time. Sanitation was, truly, primitive. Human waste was dumped into alleys or the rivers, and the streets were narrow, designed for a smaller population, and now choked with people, animals, music, and commerce. The summer of 1793 was brutal. A drought gripped the city, and the heat didn't break. The air hung motionless over the docks, trapping the stench of fish, tar, and human sweat. In the still water of the rain barrels, something was breeding, a mosquito, small and striped, that had arrived on ships from the Caribbean. The Aedes aegypti, no one knew its name, no one knew what it carried. The trigger arrived by ship, and in late July and early August, vessels from Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, began docking at the Arch Street wharf. The island was in chaos, a slave rebellion had erupted into a full-scale revolution, and French colonists were fleeing by the thousands, cramming onto any ship that would take them. They brought trunks of clothing, furniture, and servants, but they also brought yellow fever. The first cases appeared among the refugees, and a few deaths were noted, but not alarmed over. Fevers were common in port cities, after all. Malaria, typhus, dysentery, these were expected hazards of urban life. But yellow fever was different, it moved with a speed that defied the logic of contagion. By mid-August, the disease had jumped from the refugee population to native Philadelphians. The cluster centered on Water Street, near the wharves, an area that was working class, densely packed, and filthy. The smell alone was notorious: rotting cargo, standing water, open sewers. Dr. Rush, who had been called to treat several patients, recognized that this was not a typical fever, and on August 19, Rush made the diagnosis official. He sent letters to colleagues describing a bilious-remitting yellow fever with symptoms more severe than anything he'd encountered. Other doctors resisted the diagnosis. Yellow fever had not appeared in Philadelphia in decades, and some argued it was just a bad outbreak of something else. Outbreak of autumnal bilious fever, exaggerated, by panic. But the bodies began to accumulate. The disease didn't discriminate: rich and poor, black and white, young and old, all were susceptible. The progression was, truly, terrifying. It began with chills, then spiking fever, headache so severe that patients screamed, pain in the back and limbs, nausea, vomiting. On the third or fourth day, a deceptive remission would occur, the fever would drop, and the patient would seem to recover. Families allowed themselves to hope, but then, within hours, the fever would return, worse. The skin turned yellow as the liver failed. The vomit turned black, thick with blood altered by stomach acid. Hemorrhages erupted from the nose, gums, and urinary tract. Delirium set in, then coma, then death. By the end of August, dozens were dying every week. The College of Physicians met and issued a public statement on August 27. Their advice was blunt: those who can leave should leave immediately. The evacuation of Philadelphia was not orderly, it was a panicked stampede. Out of a population of 50,000, an estimated 17,000 to 20,000 fled in a matter of weeks. They took what they could carry, and ran. Carriages clogged the roads out of the city. Families abandoned homes with furniture still inside, doors left unlocked, windows open to the fetid air. The wealthy left first. President George Washington departed for Mount Vernon on September 10. Thomas Jefferson left for Monticello. Alexander Hamilton and his wife contracted the fever but fled as soon as they could walk. Henry Knox, the Secretary of War, was gone by early September. The federal government effectively dissolved, the doors of the Treasury were locked. The business of the nation stopped. The state and city governments crumbled. Next, judges, clerks, and constables fled. The courts closed. The post office shut down. The mayor, Matthew Clarkson, was one of the few officials who stayed, but he was, by all accounts, a rare exception. Power was limited. He had no police force, no sanitation workers, no apparatus of governance, and he was leading a ghost town. The panic extended beyond the city limits, and it was, truly, a desperate time. Towns along the roads refused entry to Philadelphians, and guards were posted at bridges and crossroads. Hamilton and his wife, recovering from the fever, were turned away from inn after inn, a heartbreaking experience, no doubt. The refugees were treated as plague carriers, and New York and Baltimore imposed strict quarantines on all ships and travelers from Philadelphia. The capital of the United States was effectively under siege, not by an army, but by fear, a fear that was, slowly, suffocating the city. Inside the city, those who remained lived in isolation, and the silence was, at times, deafening. The streets were silent, the markets were empty, and the old custom of shaking hands disappeared. Friends passed one another with a cold nod, avoiding contact, and anyone wearing mourning clothes, a black armband, a piece of crepe was shunned like a leper. The social contract unraveled, and it was, truly, a tragic sight. Parents abandoned children at the first sign of fever, and spouses fled from dying partners, a desperate, and often, cruel act. Dr. Rush recorded cases of elderly parents being thrust into the street by their own families, and the fear of contagion overrode every moral obligation. In many homes, the only person willing to care for the dying was a black nurse, hired or volunteered, performing the duties that family would not. The medical community was at war with itself, and the debate was, often, heated. Dr. Benjamin Rush believed the fever originated from local environmental causes, specifically the rotting coffee on Ball's Wharf, a theory that was, by no means, universally accepted. He championed the miasmatic theory, and the air itself had been corrupted by putrid exhalations, or so he thought. His treatment followed the principles of heroic medicine, and he administered massive doses of calomel, a mercury compound, and jalap to purge the bowels. He bled patients aggressively, removing up to 80% of their blood volume in some cases, a treatment that was, by many, considered extreme. Rush believed he was restoring the body's humoral balance, but critics believed he was killing his patients, a criticism that was, sadly, not without merit. The symptoms of mercury poisoning, fatigue, confusion, tremors, looked disturbingly similar to late-stage yellow fever. The aggressive bloodletting left patients weak, dehydrated, and unable to fight the infection. Yet Rush's reputation was so great, and his confidence so absolute, that many followed his methods. The opposing camp, largely Federalist-aligned physicians, argued that the fever was imported, not local, and they had a point. They favored quarantine, isolation, and the use of aromatic deterrents, vinegar-soaked handkerchiefs, tobacco smoke, garlic cloves worn around the neck. They burned tar in the streets, hoping to cleanse the air, but it was all in vain. None of it worked. A third approach emerged at Bush Hill, the city's makeshift hospital, a place that, before September, was a nightmare, overcrowded, filthy, understaffed. Patients lay in their own waste, and the dead were left beside the living. But when Stephen Girard, a wealthy merchant, and Peter Helm, a cooper, volunteered to manage the facility, everything changed. Girard rejected Rush's methods. He was, by all accounts, a man of great compassion, and implemented what he called the French method: cleanliness, fresh air, light nourishment, wine, and minimal medication. He bathed patients, opened windows, and treated them with dignity, and it was, truly, beautiful. The survival rate at Bush Hill improved dramatically. Yet Girard's success was largely ignored by the medical establishment, and Rush's theories dominated the narrative.